Welcome to another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dian, and today I'm joined by Natan Rolnik. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Hey, hi Leo. Thank you for having me.
Before we begin, let you do your own introduction.
All right. So I'm Nathan. I've been doing iOS for a while, since iOS 3, 4. I learned to program in Objective-C, and that's mostly my passion. Along the way, I've learned other stuff, and nowadays I work as a senior iOS dev at Monday.com, and in my free time I also write content mostly around tooling and server-side Swift in my website, SWIFTTOOLKIT.DEV. That's really like a passion of mine.
Have you written for Codeco?
Yeah, in the past I wrote some articles for Codeco.
So Monday has
that's how I started writing us.
Okay.
So
Monday has two Israeli Codeco authors. That's pretty awesome.
Yes. Yeah, we have a few more. Here in the country, we have a few more people that contributed to Codeco. But
Right. But previous guests, we were just chatting before the show. Previous guest Shai is also at Monday. So
yes.
Sounds like a pretty great place with some really smart people.
Yeah, I can't say that about myself, but we have a growing team. It's an interesting product.
Yeah, it is an interesting product. We've been talking a lot online about some of the stuff you've been working on and some of the stuff on your blog. I wanted to kind of maybe let you introduce what you've been talking about and what you've been working on lately when it comes to Swift.
Right. So, what I've been my goal with this website was to produce some content that I feel that the community lacked a little bit, with good tutorials, practical tutorials, and even sometimes interactive stuff on the web, of content focused on tooling and server side. So, for example, one of the things that I did was a package.swift syntax cheat sheet. That was actually one of the first posts. Another one that I'm really proud about was the Swift ArgumentParser interactive guide. So we cover cool. This is divided in 3 sections and explaining options and flags and arguments, what are the difference between them, and option groups, and how to handle errors. So I built a little terminal simulator where people can actually run commands that run the executables that are in the sample code, so they can see the result of what that code means. So mostly it's been content around CLI stuff, a little bit about server side that I want to write more about it. Now we just had Hummingbird 2 released by Adam and Ioannis.
Yeah, so, you just released an episode at the time of the recording. Yeah.
Yes.
So people should definitely check that out. Hummingbird is fantastic.
Yeah,
I like it a lot.
It is.
So
I think both Vapor and Hummingbird, they are amazing, and I think that connects a little bit to what I wanted to say, is that I think that Swift empowers us so much in ways that 10 years ago we couldn't, as iOS developers, that you had to learn other areas. You still have, and I don't think that you shouldn't learn other stuff, but it gives so much power in comparing to where we were 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, could you imagine this stuff in Objective-C, like server-side Objective-C,
actually,
or command line Objective-C? I'm sure.
It is possible. It is, right. But Swift is great in so many ways. We can talk about that later.
Yeah.
that
Well,
that makes it.
I want to talk. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, that makes it much more of a fit. I'm sure, like, you could write all these things with Objective C, but not only the verbosity, but language features and that Swift allows us. So, I in one of my talks that I gave recently was like a quick introduction to Vapor. I actually had a screenshot of a service that was called Objective Cloud. I'm not sure you remember that.
No.
And they actually gave
I
a
don't remember
framework.
this.
They gave a framework that you could write HTTP servers just like Vapor, but I mean, not just like Vapor, but in the same sense that Vapor or Express. So you could write Objective-C stuff, and they had a cloud that ran on Macs, and could help with deploying. So Swift is maybe that the vision is the same, that you can share code, maybe that you can use your knowledge, your models, and deploy that on the cloud and have that as part of your app in another place.
Well, let's deep dive a little bit more into the CLI part. Like, yeah, why do you think Swift is a good option? Just let's start particularly when it comes to CLI tools.
Yeah. I like to divide that in like 3 or 4 areas where I see the advantages.
Okay.
And the first one is the language itself. Like, it has so many great features. It has all the foundation API that we are used to it and gets improved, and like date formatting and whatnot, like all foundation. We have I don't know, enums, like the associated values, like all this can live inside a CLI tool. We have macros. You can use macros from your tools. You can use async await, which is like for CLI tools, they're super helpful as well. Like all the time you have to do either network requests or disk operations that they might take some time. So writing them with async await is much better than completion blocks or promises and futures. And many things like that. The language is we all are used to it, right? So that's number one. Number two, I think, is if you're running on a Mac, you can access UIKit and AppKit APIs and even Swift UI. If you want to draw some stuff, you can generate images. That's a second advantage. A third one is the whole ecosystem, right? We can use packages that run on Linux, but they also run on Mac, and they are packages that maybe you are already familiar with, and you can also share code with your own within your team and iOS app and CLI and maybe a server component that uses the same models. And I think that the most important of them, like the fourth one, is that if you have a team of iOS developers, they all are gonna know Swift. Like one person might know more Node, the other one might know Python, the other one might know Ruby and Rust. But if it's a team of mobile developers and iOS developers, they all should know Swift, and they could be able to jump in and improve and fix and add features and stuff like so. So I think that these are 4 different advantages that they are very, very powerful.
Do you think it's easier to go from being an iOS developer in Swift to a CLI tool developer in Swift, or is it easier to go from like a Node or Python developer of CLI tools to a Swift developer in CLI tools? Does that make sense?
It makes. I think that maybe I'm not sure about the answer, but I think that because the Node ecosystem started more from the backend, like endpoint, like from the backend view, So they probably started off with more tooling around that, and like
did it though? Like Node is JavaScript based. It was all
yeah. Oh,
it's actually
yeah.
all browser based. So technically,
Right.
Node.
No, but let's say Ruby.
I mean, it's Node, right? But like,
yeah, but let's
it
say
is
Ruby
more.
if you compare.
Yeah. Okay, there we go.
Like they are by definition, they have this more purpose of. I'm not sure about the purpose, but if you say Ruby, you're probably gonna think about Ruby on Rails, or if you say Node, you're probably gonna think about Express or other framework. So that's basically where I want to go. Like, so I think that as a consequence, that their ecosystem is much more robust in that sense, and they're good options. They might be a better option from, I don't know, if you're a programmer that knows both languages, but you're not specifically coming from focusing on a team of iOS developers, or might be probably that Node is a better choice. I don't know, maybe.
Right.
But I think that the ecosystem is growing, and there's been a lot of evolution and work on that. So I think that time makes it roll here as more and more efforts are invested, and we have more packages around it. I think it's a matter of time, and the community realizes that this is a really good option, and as it grows, right? How do you see this?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think, as we'll talk about later, I feel like the ecosystem when it comes to CLI tools has really seen like a big. It seems like there's been a lot going on lately in the last 6 months as far as what's out there. Obviously, we've had ArgumentParser, which has been a big benefit, and I've even given a talk at it. It was like 5 years ago, I think. I gave a talk on it. But it's like there's a lot you can do. Well, let's talk a little bit more about ArgumentParser specifically. Like, what did you learn when you built that interactive tool? As far as how it works, or how the mechanics of it work, or what are some quirks about it that people don't realize when you built the interactive tool that you don't think most people know?
The interactive guide actually made me learn other things about lambdas, and because they run in a lambda, and I just returned the result. I actually learned more in the last few weeks. I had the chance to give it a try to Swift Cloud by Andrew Barba, which I also wrote a little bit about it. And the argument parser it actually has, it does a few things. It's not only parsing. It does parsing of commands and translates them into structs that you can where code lives. Sorry, but it also does all the handling of the main like the entry point of your tool. Like you don't need to write the main function, right? You just mark your struct, your root command with @main, and parsable command takes care of getting the input, translate, like doing the parsing, calling the validate function. First it validates, then it runs, and it wraps that in a do catch block, in a do catch statement. And if it errors, it also outputs the error. So it does a lot around it.
Right.
So that's what I learned in the last few weeks, and and it's great. I just felt that it's a bit limited if you want a bit more control, and if you want.
What do you mean exactly?
If you want to add like colors and display errors with styling, or I don't know, if you want to add loaders or interactive input.
Okay.
We were just talking about Node, right? It's like,
Yeah.
they support this. They have packages that they do this right away, and
Right.
and like, let's say we have Toolkit from the folks at Vapor that it does
Right.
some sort of interactive stuff, but it's not in the same package as the argument parser. So
I mean,
I'm also not sure
makes-
if that's their goal.
Right. Like, it kind of makes sense that Argument Parser is good about the front end part, but I do agree that there's like something missing when it comes to not the front end part. They have a tool that's really good at parsing arguments and just running a thing.
Yeah.
And what I do agree is missing is some of the pieces that you mentioned. So let's go over what you mentioned. You said loaders. What do you mean by loaders exactly?
In the same way that when you have a UI on an app, that you see a loader and then data shows.
Okay.
Sometimes let's say you want to authenticate with some service, or you want to run a service that takes a while. I don't know, it's going to build a Docker image or download a Docker image.
Yeah.
It's nice to see some output in the same way that you don't want to see a blank screen on an app. You also don't want to see in the terminal that it's stuck because you don't know what's going on. So
Right.
So another thing that I learned recently is like how let's say loaders work. They actually, in CLI tools, they actually print stuff and delete and update that, and it keeps changing the output without adding more. It just replaces the current state.
So what we're talking about is the like VT100 commands, basically, where you can do like control commands to say move the cursor to the left, move the cursor to the right, up, down,
or printing
erase,
stuff. Yes,
colors, printing, all that stuff.
Yes,
yeah, totally.
and ConsoleKit has a lot of that stuff, but I don't
really?
think that ConsoleKit. They have menus and there's also a great package. It's called SwiftUI with a capital T. That it has a similar syntax.
That in this show.
Yeah, and
SwiftUI.
Yeah, and you can use that for terminal apps, CLI apps, and I don't think that's the goal of the argument parser. Like, it's so good at parsing, and the way they designed all the property wrappers, option groups, flags, arguments. It's super powerful, but in the same way, like, so let's say I was looking for interactivity in the argument parser, and I found that there's a branch that it's 1 year old. It's been stale, and it's a bit of a bummer because we have no idea where that's gonna have, like, where it's headed and what's the direction.
How is argument parser working with when it comes to Swift 6 type stuff?
That's a good question. I think.
Do you know if there's no issues with like sendable or anything like that?
I'm not sure they're marketed with. It's worth checking. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, it's fine. I figured I'd ask. The other thing you had on here was SWIFTTOOLKIT. Did you look at that as well?
I didn't try it yet. It's in my wish list of posts of packages that I wanna highlight. I want to play around with it and see, but I don't think it's similar to SwiftUI, to the other package we mentioned.
Right.
But it's also nice for building UIs and borders and tables and things like that.
Okay. Yeah, I'm looking at this stuff. It's amazing what people have done, and
Oh yeah, it's incredible because like
I think I don't know. I've started like 3 or 4 different projects where I played with the VT 100 stuff and the codes, and it's just like a rabbit hole for me. I think what for me is missing, and maybe I mentioned this on the previous podcast, but like is more stuff hooked up to like observable. I know that's kind of what's going on with SwiftTOOLKIT, but with the new change from Combine, I'm not sure that it's compatible with the new observable stuff. So that's really what I'd like to see is something like that. The other tool I want to mention,
I think that all this is eventually they're gonna arrive.
Right.
But I'm not sure if disappointing is the word, but I would be nice to see more efforts on those areas from everyone.
Right.
And I include myself there. Like,
if only we had infinite time, right?
Yes. Yes.
I do one tool I wanted to mention that I use a lot. It's not Swift based, but it's definitely used in my iOS development, and that would be Fastlane. It has a really nice terminal interface where it doesn't try to do everything, but it tries to do enough that I feel like there's a lot of great ideas there that we in the Swift community could use when it comes to
I think that they also
building
have
an interactive app.
Yeah, they have the advantage that in Ruby they can do all the plugins stuff, and it's like much more dynamic, and it plays together much more nicer than Swift. Like it's much harder to do that in Swift. Like if you wanted to have plugins for CLIs, and I know that Ruby is much more friendly in this aspect. Yeah.
Yep. Look. Anything else you want to talk about when it comes to CLI tools?
If there's anything else, I think that we covered. Like I just think that the UI and experience of CLI tools even when we write for ourselves, like we could do better in terms of explaining what's available, like what commands are available and help and things like that, and like dividing commands and subcommands into sections, like of different areas or different domains, and also output, like being able to control output, and instead of like just Xcode build, like just spitting out information, and that's why there are many parser, or I think it's XCPretty or X, right? That does transforms
XCPretty. Yep, that's a big one.
Yeah, so I think that it's worth, like, in general, tooling, investing time in tooling and in tooling UI and in tooling experience is one of those things that you never regret. Because in the end of the day, it's a tool that's gonna help you. So any time you spend on it, you're gonna get it back pretty quick once you use it.
So there was a really interesting article you had out a few weeks ago about this Kelbox idea. You want to explain what that means exactly and why you built a macro?
No, so that's not mine, actually. The macro itself is written by Rick Van Voorden. He's from LA.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. So all credits go to him, because I met him and I saw him presenting about it in a conference, and before that I I didn't invest time in really understanding what copy and write means, like, and all the consequences and how and what's the impact it can have in your in apps. And so basically this goes back to all the basics of reference types and value types. And copy and write goes to the concept that when you use value types, whenever you copy those types, they actually take memory, and instead of differently than reference types where you just copy a pointer but the memory is the same, the memory address of all the copied objects are the same. When you use value types, you actually use more RAM memory, right?
Right.
So if you copy thousands and thousands of structs that have many integers and strings and other primitives, it actually takes more space on all of this. So copy and write is actually it's not a new concept in computing. It's like from the 80s, that says you just copy if you're gonna change. You just copy the value if you're gonna change it. If you're not gonna change it, just use a pointer. So instead of replicating these value types everywhere and having them redundantly in many places in the memory, just keep a pointer. Like you usually use a storage, like you use a class, an internal class that is storage, and you only really copy it in the memory if you are gonna modify the value. So that's actually what copy on write means. It's copy whenever you're gonna do a write. If you're not gonna change or if you're not gonna do a write, don't copy it. So in Swift you can do that using the function that is called is uniquely referenced.
Is known uniquely referenced.
Is known uniquely referenced. Yeah. So you can do that in your own properties, and you can write a storage, and it's fairly easy. Like it's a few lines of code to do this for properties. But whenever you have more and more properties that you wanna include in this copy and write pattern, it gets more. It's more work, and if you have a lot of structs with a lot of properties that you want to support this, it gets really, it's a lot of boilerplate code. So what Rick wrote is... Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I had a couple of questions. So why use a struct, if anyways, if you're just going to use pointers in the long run?
Because you still want to be able to... Wait, let me think a little bit more about it.
No problem.
No, that's a good question.
Yeah, because somebody's going to be like, okay, why do I have to add all this cruft? Why not just use a class anyways and call it good?
Right, because... Oh, okay. So when we add it, we could keep that part out. But so the problem is that when you have classes everywhere, whenever you change a property of one object, it's gonna change
for all of them. Okay, that makes total sense.
So with structs, you keep, with copy and write, you keep the best of both worlds. That's what I used in my article explaining it.
Yeah,
you keep the best of both worlds. You use
so basically
classes.
It's a struct. It's a
that
struct.
wraps a class.
Right, and then this like.
So you share memory. Whenever it's the same, you share the memory.
Thing. There you go. Yeah,
whenever you want to change, you copy that, and that macro does it in a really smart and short way. You just declare, you attach the macro to your struct, and you declare which properties you want to be supporting You want to support copy and write, and it will do all the code generation behind the scenes for you.
Yeah. Where I've seen this is, and you mentioned it here, is Swift Neo, but specifically like Vapor. A lot of the Vapor storage stuff uses this kind of idea where they have like, it's a struct, but then the properties are all like with a class inside it, right? That's where I've seen this a lot. Is this something you should be doing when you're building an iOS app, or is it more useful on the server? Or
no, I actually think it's very relevant to iOS and macOS apps because this can affect performance.
Okay.
Not only you waste more memory, but you also waste computing processing for copying all this stuff. So if you pass around a lot of data between views, like between view models or between different objects, if you are in the scale, like in high scales and property and these structs, they are big, it might also like it might be very relevant, but you also need to take into account some considerations that when using copy and write in some place, like in some conditions, it can lead to performance issues as well.
Because it has to do with the check, or what specifically is the reason for that?
Because if you are like, let's say you have an array of values and you are iterating over them, and inside a for loop you are modifying something, and so let's say you're gonna be at every write you're gonna be copying stuff, and this is inside for loop, so you can that's called accidental quadratics. It's a concept that I mentioned in that blog post.
Okay.
That I also had no idea that existed before learning about copy and write, and I linked there to some talks about performance in Swift that they explain this concept in a more friendly way than just a scary name. So it can actually lead to issues if you don't know what you're doing. Like it needs to be used with like knowing what you're doing. Like just don't throw it everywhere. And I think it's also worth mentioning in the Cowbox repo they have another repo that they link to another repo of benchmarks, and it shows data, how much data is consumed and how much memory is consumed and what the real impact can be in an app. And I think it like you can run them both. The food truck sample app from the last dub. So what Rick took that project and he applied the Cowbox macro in some of the structs there, and he compared that performance and memory, and he did profiling and he explains everything in the in that repo. So if for people who are into this kind of work and analysis and getting into the lower levels of how your code performs, that's definitely that's a feast for people who like this.
And we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Of course, your article and the repo. So do you want to talk about SPM?
Yeah, I think we could talk about it.
Well, what do you think is missing when it comes to Swift Package Manager right now?
There's one thing that really annoys me. It's whenever I want to spin off a new project that I know exactly what I want. That I don't have the option to get a template and start using that. So for example, if you want to start a new Vapor project, you probably should use the Vapor CLI. It's going to ask you a few questions. Do you want Fluent? Do you want to use which database do you want? Do you want Leaf, which is a templating engine? And then it's gonna take all that and create for you a starter project. And for people who worked with npm, that's, let's say, my website is built in Svelte, and I just you do npm create, and it follows all the instructions that template has. And that's also an interactive thing, that you interact with the questions, and based on your answers, it's gonna create your template. So I feel that for these projects, so I want to create a Lambda. Okay, where do you start from in Swift? Okay, I go to the Swift AWS Lambda runtime repo, and then I read the README, and I copy whatever package dependencies I need to add. Then I go to the terminal and I do Swift package init -- type executable, and I start manually doing stuff. So even if there were templates for these, I would need to go manually and clone the repository and remove the Git remote, and do a lot of there's a lot of repetition and things that in other ecosystems they already solved that with templates.
Well, Nathan, can't you just use Xcode to create your Swift package? Won't that do everything?
Xcode?
Not really.
Yeah.
Not really.
Not really. So, we could all write a tool that would do this, but let's say npm has this built in do npm create, and I feel that some of these things we are still not sure if limited,
so
or
we have like a terminal front end, right? Like, what would you? Let's just say we had that, right, where it could ask you questions. Like, you're just talking purely about creating a Swift package through the terminal and like asking certain questions, right?
Based on a template that some organization or some individual put it out there to help to ease.
Yeah, I mean, that wouldn't be. Would you want something to where you had like npm install save, where it actually adds the dependency for you?
So do you know what I learned? Not recently, that SPM supports that. There was a great article. We can link to that. I don't remember. I'll send you later. Dave Verver mentioned it in iOS Dev Weekly a few weeks ago, I think.
Okay.
I think
Does
it was
it work
maybe
like pretty well, or like?
Yes.
I do. Actually, I'm actually remembering what you said. Yeah.
But with npm it's much easier, right? You just do, because in SPM we have a few layers. We have there's the package dependency and there's the target dependency. So first you need to add your package dependency to your package, and once you have that, you can add two different target dependencies. With npm, I don't think that you can have multiple targets, or you just add. There are dependencies and dev dependencies, but you just run one command and it installs.
Right. So you had an episode with them a few weeks ago.
Yes, a month ago.
Is that what he was talking about?
No, I think he published it. It was someone else who published this. I could find it.
Yeah, we'll put a link to that in the show notes.
We'll put a link to that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree 100. I've gone down that rabbit hole too. So I'm looking for something where I can create a package and be like, do you want to build a command line tool? Do you want to build a server? Do you want to build a Lambda? And then just gets it started for you. Because I do feel like that's missing a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally. I mean, though, like, let me just be devil's advocate, even though I agree with you. But, like, there are tools out there. No problem.
Sorry.
There are tools out there like Vapor CLI, essentially, for JavaScript stuff. Like, that's not unreasonable that you build a custom command line tool for your
right,
like,
for templates.
I agree. It's not great, but like I use Vue.js. I've done stuff
totally
with React
solvable.
Native
Yeah.
where it's like basically you run the command and it creates a whole package.json for you. So so there is a lot of stuff in the JavaScript community out there specifically for this case where it's like so like what I'm trying to say is like the Vapor CLI is not totally unreasonable approach to that. Even though I wish it was more like what you're trying to do.
for sure. But what I mean is that I feel would be very helpful to the whole ecosystem is having this baked into, like having a standard that whoever wants to offer a template that is SPM compatible
Right.
would be helpful and nice.
Right. So I would like to do that. So I've published my own DSL for Swift packages that I use now for server side and iOS applications. And like for me, it wouldn't be that hard to go take the next step and like basically turn it into a command line tool. That's what I'd like to do with it.
Yeah.
To where
And
there would be a lot. I don't know if you've looked at package DSL, but basically the
I
idea
haven't
being
yet.
like, yeah, no problem. But like the idea being is you put all your dependencies and stuff in separate files and use like a Swift UI DSL to create your Swift package.
Result builders.
And, yes, lots of result builders, and that would even make it easier because all you have to do is create a new file or remove a file, and there you go. So yeah, that's you're motivating me. Thanks, because I need more stuff to do right now. Obviously,
Yes.
Before,
well, you could just publish it in using Homebrew, and
yeah, right.
And you know what? Maybe this could be Swift evolution proposal, especially if maybe the Swift server work group could push it. I don't know.
I do think the package.swift is a bit dated for a lot of reasons. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or two we get a new
one.
Yeah, just because there's a lot of stuff to it that's awkward.
Standards are hard to replace. One can hope.
Right. What else did you want to talk about before we close out? We had a few other topics on the doc. What are you most interested in talking about before we close out?
No, I think we covered a lot. Well, like my main message with this, with my website is basically, we can much easier than 5, not even 10 years ago, 4 years ago, we can build tools and even server stuff in a much more easier way than a while ago, and they help us. Like I've done stuff that I'm happy I invested time on them, and it pays off. It's worth investing it. So like as iOS developers, at least there are not many, like, how can I phrase that? We have tons of opportunities for automating processes or improving processes. But if you're like just focused on on the app itself, we don't like, if we leave this little box of getting things done, and thinking more about these processes and how you can help your team and how you can help your future self. That's the main message, is you can go out and build stuff for you and for your team, and it's gonna be worth it, and it's gonna be maintainable, and I think that, again, we are in a different place that we were not 4 years ago. So I think that everyone should try to familiarize themselves with these tools and this, giving a try for, I don't know, deploying a little function or deploying stuff, even for personal stuff, for fun. And
do you think any of the stuff that you've picked up is applicable specifically to the typical, like 99% of us are SwiftUI iOS developers, right? What do you think you've picked up in your development tools that has helped you when it comes to just your day-to-day iOS development stuff?
What do you mean? I'm not sure I get a question.
What have you learned with building server-side stuff or CLI stuff that you have then applied to your day-to-day iOS
back to iOS
work?
development? That's a good question. I wasn't ready for this one. I think that let me attempt to answer it. I think for me, I can give it a try, but go ahead.
Yeah, no. Let me try. I'll probably not be as good as yours, but I do think like you get a greater appreciation of the language and what you could do with the language, and understanding its versatility and how, like. So I'll actually give you an example. Is when I was at the server-side Swift conference. Franz gave a really good talk on this with pattern that he used with non-sendable objects. And this was specifically for the server, right? And it occurred to me that like this issue, while it's more applicable to the server, is something I've run into when it comes to certain non-sendable types, like stuff concerning Swift data. And it was kind of like a eureka moment for me of something that I could directly apply to my Swift UI work that's not even server related. Yes. But it's like, oh, wow. Yes. Yeah, this is really cool. And I mean, that's a specific instance, but there's little things where you pick up on stuff in the server. Like I've seen like the stuff you talked about, the copy on write. Like I'm sure that's more on the server, but it's definitely, like you said, applicable in iOS development.
Oh, it's totally,
Yeah.
I think that... Let's say,
I mean, I think that's a thing that grew out of the server community, I'm sure. But like, it's definitely, like you said, applicable for iOS development. So there's things like that I find when it comes to working on this stuff.
No, I think even if you learn other languages, you can learn things that are relevant to like concepts or even limitations. Like some languages, they have limitations that. With those limitations, you learn new techniques or new patterns that in some more advanced cases you don't have to use. Or, but I don't know. But I think that answering to your question, maybe, I don't know, the concept of futures and promises. I learned a little bit of JS and a little bit of Vapor.
C# and JS. That was it for me. And then going into Vapor, it was like, I get totally what's going on. And then I was like, man, I wish they had async await though. And then Eureka, here we are.
Yeah. And so even though I had never used promises in the iOS domain, it's like, it's good to know more techniques and more patterns and more. You think about things as streams. So, for example, if you were gonna work with reactive stuff or combine and even async sequences, it's the same. It's the same thought, right? It's the same way of thinking. Like that, everything is a stream, and yeah, I think that even talking about Swift concurrency, like on the server, you also have you have to deal with sendable, maybe non-copyable, maybe all the strict concurrency, and maybe it's gonna be easier to learn there than on an iOS app case, and from there you could start applying. Or maybe you have a smaller app on the server that's easier to start migrating to the Swift 6 strict mode. And once you're ready and you understood how it works, you could apply that to a bigger scale iOS app or framework.
Exactly. 100%. Nathan, thank you so much for coming on the show. This is really fantastic.
Thank you for reaching out.
Where can people find you online?
I'm on both X and Mastodon as Natan Rolnik without an H. We can leave the link. And the website we mentioned, it's SWIFTTOOLKIT.DEV. Yep. Also on X and Mastodon. I've been posting weekly for a little bit more than 4 months. I've been focusing on content that is not sure if different but I try to make stuff that's sometimes interactive, sometimes with tutorials. So if you're interested in this domain, I'll definitely go there. These are the places I'll be happy to chat with anyone that
And definitely check out the articles on Nathan's website. There's a lot of good stuff. And subscribe or follow, because
thank you.
People can find me on Twitter at LeoGDion. My website is brightdigit.com. I'm LeoGDion at c.im on Mastodon. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe, and if you're listening to this on a podcast player, please put a review. If you have any requests for topics, let me know. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you think. Join our Patreon to get early access to episodes like this, and subscribe to the newsletter so that way you can catch some more content as well. Thank you, everybody, and have a good rest of your week. Bye.
Bye-bye.